I thought I knew her. 20 years, 20 long years of marriage, and I thought I had her heart mapped out like the back of my hand. Ellen. My Ellen. Her soft brown eyes, the way she'd hum while cooking breakfast, the quiet strength she carried through every storm we faced together. I was wrong. So wrong. It hit me that Tuesday evening, February 18th, 2025, when I came home early from the factory. The house was too quiet, no humming, no clatter of pans. Just silence, heavy and thick, pressing against my chest. I called her name. Ellen. Nothing. My boots echoed on the hardwood as I climbed the stairs, a creeping unease twisting in my gut. That's when I saw it, her phone, abandoned on the nightstand, buzzing like a trapped wasp. I shouldn't have looked. I know I shouldn't have, but something, some dark instinct, pulled my hand toward it. A message flashed on the screen. From him. My boss, Richard Grayson. Last night was worth it. He's safe now. You're a hero, Ellen. My knees buckled. I sank onto the bed, our bed, staring at those words until they blurred into a haze of betrayal. Last night? She told me she was at her sister's, helping with the baby. A lie. A cold, calculated lie. My mind raced, piecing it together. Richard's smug grin at work today, the way he'd clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're lucky to have her, Tom." Lucky. The word burned in my throat like acid. She walked in an hour later, her coat dusted with snow, her face pale but composed. Too composed. "Tom," she said, stopping short when she saw me holding her phone. Her eyes widened, just for a second, before she squared her shoulders. "I can explain." Explain. My voice was a growl, low and dangerous. I stood, towering over her, though inside I was crumbling. "Explain what, Ellen? That you've been sneaking around with Richard? That you've—" I couldn't finish. The air felt too thin, my chest too tight. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice trembling but firm. She stepped closer, hands outstretched like I was some wounded animal she could soothe. "I did it for you, Tom. For us. He was going to fire you. The layoffs, your name was on the list. I begged him, and he made me a deal. A deal." The room spun. My wife, my quiet, steady Ellen, had sold herself to save my job. And she stood there, chin high, like she expected me to thank her. I stared at her, motionless, her words echoing in my skull like a hammer striking steel. A deal. A deal. My job, my measly, soul-crushing job at the factory, was worth that to her? I stumbled back, the phone slipping from my hand, clattering onto the floor. "You're lying," I whispered, but my voice cracked, betraying the hope I clung to. "Tell me you're lying, Ellen." She didn't flinch. Her eyes, those soft brown eyes I'd loved for 2 decades, hardened into something I didn't recognize. "I'm not lying, Tom. I couldn't let you lose everything. You've been breaking yourself for that place for us. I saw the numbers. We'd lose the house, the car, everything." Her hands balled into fists, trembling at her sides. "Richard promised me. One night, and you'd keep your spot. I saved us. Saved us." I laughed, a bitter, jagged sound that tore at my throat. "You think this filth, saves us? You think I'd want to keep anything built on that?" I turned away, gripping the dresser so hard my knuckles whitened. The room smelled of her lavender perfume, and it made me sick. Everything I'd trusted was rotting beneath my feet. "Tom, listen to me." She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in, desperate. I hated it. I hated every second. But I had no choice. He had the power, not me, not us. You know how he is. Oh, I knew Richard. Sleek, charming, a shark in a tailored suit. He'd always lingered too long when Ellen dropped off my lunch at the factory, his eyes glinting with something I'd been too naive to name. I shook her off, my voice ice cold. "You had a choice. You could have told me. We could have fought it together. Instead, I stopped, the words too heavy, too sharp. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then she said it, soft as a confession. "I didn't want you to hate me." "Hate you?" I spun to face her, my chest heaving. "Ellen, I don't even know you anymore." And that was the truth, the brutal, bleeding truth. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by this stranger who thought betrayal was a gift. That's when the doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent. I froze. Ellen's face drained of color, and I knew somehow. I knew. This wasn't over. Not yet. The doorbell pierced the air again, shrill, demanding. My eyes locked on Ellen's, searching for something, anything, to anchor me. But her face twisted, fear flickering where defiance had been. "Don't answer it," she whispered, her voice barely audible, fragile. Too late. My feet moved on their own, rage and curiosity pulling me downstairs like a puppet on strings. I yanked the door open, snow swirling in from the dark February night. There stood Richard. Richard, all polished shoes and that smug, lopsided grin I'd always wanted to wipe off his face. He held a bottle of wine, casual as if he'd been invited. "Evening, Tom," he said, his tone smooth, too smooth. "Thought I'd drop by. Check on my favorite employee." My fist clenched, nails biting into my palms. "Get out," I snarled, low and guttural. But he didn't budge. He leaned in, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne, sandalwood and arrogance. Now, he said, "let's not be rash. Ellen told you, didn't she? About our arrangement?" The world tilted. He knew I knew, and he was here, gloating. I lunged, grabbing his collar, shoving him against the porch railing. The wine bottle crashed to the ground, red liquid pooling like blood in the snow. "You think this is a game?" I roared. "You think you can just—" "Tom, stop." Ellen's voice cut through, sharp and panicked. She was behind me, tugging at my arm. "He's not worth it. Please." Her plea, her defense of him, lit a fuse in me I didn't know I had. I released Richard, stepping back, breathing hard. He straightened his coat, smirking like he'd won something. "I came to explain," Richard said, brushing snow off his sleeve. "It wasn't personal, Tom. Business is business. You were on the chopping block, years of service or not. Ellen, well, she's resourceful, persuasive." His eyes flicked to her, and my stomach churned. I turned to Ellen, my voice a hiss. "You called him here?" She shook her head, frantic. "No. I swear, I didn't." But doubt gnawed at me, had she? Was this all part of her deal? Before I could press her, headlights flashed down the street. A car screeched to a stop, and out stumbled my brother, Jake, drunk, disheveled, waving a crumpled letter in his hand. "Tom," he bellowed, staggering toward us. "You gotta see this. It's about the factory. It's all lies." Jake's voice sliced through the icy air, slurred but insistent, as he stumbled up the porch steps. "Tom, you gotta see this." His breath reeked of whiskey, his coat half unbuttoned, the crumpled letter flapping in his hand like a wounded bird. Richard raised an eyebrow. Ellen shrank back, and I just stood there, caught in a storm I couldn't name. My brother, my wife, my boss, all colliding on this frozen night, February 21st, 2025, like fate had decided to gut me in one brutal swing. "Jake," I said, my voice tight, "what are you doing here?" He swayed, grabbing the railing for balance, and thrust the letter at me. "Read it, Tom. It's from Mikey, from the union. Found it in my mailbox today. It's about the layoffs, your layoffs." His bloodshot eyes darted to Richard, narrowing. "And this snake's lying to you." I snatched the paper, my hands trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of everything crashing down. Ellen's deal, Richard's smug face, and now this? The letter was scrawled in Mikey's messy handwriting, dated 2 days ago. "Tom," it read, "they're playing us. Grayson's list was fake. Union pressured him to keep you on. No one's getting cut. He's bluffing to squeeze us. Watch your back." My heart stopped. Fake? The layoffs fake? I read it again, the words blurring, my pulse hammering in my ears. I looked at Ellen, her face pale, lips parted in shock or guilt. "Ellen," I rasped, "did you know?" She shook her head, too fast, too desperate. "No, Tom. He told me." "Shut up," I snapped, turning to Richard. He was still smirking, hands in his pockets, like he was watching a play unfold. "You lied," I said, stepping toward him, my voice low, dangerous. "You made it up. The layoffs, the deal, you made her think." My fist clenched again, itching to shatter that perfect jaw. Richard shrugged, casual as ever. "Business, Tom. Leverage." Ellen was eager to help. I didn't force her. His eyes glinted, daring me to swing. I wanted to. I wanted to. But Jake grabbed my arm, slurring, "Don't, man. He's buying you. He wants you to lose it. Lose it." I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "I've already lost everything." I shoved Jake off, spinning to face Ellen. "You believed him. You didn't even check. You just—" Words failed me. The betrayal wasn't just hers anymore. It was mine, too, for trusting her, for building a life on sand. Ellen's eyes filled with tears, her hands twisting together. "I thought I was protecting you, Tom." He showed me papers, signatures. I didn't know. Her voice broke, and for a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But then Richard chuckled, a soft, mocking sound, and something inside me snapped. "You're both liars," I said, my voice cold as the snow underfoot. And I'm done. I turned to walk inside to escape this nightmare, but Jake staggered after me. Wait, Tom, there's more. Mikey said Grayson's got something else cooking. Something big. I stopped, glancing back. What? Jake fumbled with his coat, pulling out his phone, nearly dropping it. He called me before I got here, said he heard Grayson selling the factory to some overseas outfit. Layoffs or not, we're all screwed. My stomach dropped. Selling? The factory, my prison, my lifeline, wasn't even his to gamble with anymore? Richard's smirk faltered, just for a second, and I saw it confirmation. You're a dead man, I said, stepping toward him again. But before I could move, headlights flared again. Another car, this time a sleek black sedan, pulling up smooth and silent. The door opened, and out stepped a woman I didn't know. Tall, sharp-eyed, dressed in a coat that screamed money. She strode up, her heels clicking on the icy walk, ignoring the chaos. Richard Grayson, she asked, her voice crisp. He nodded, wary now. Good. I'm Lydia Crane, legal counsel for Apex Industries. We've got a problem. The sale's off, your little stunt with the union leaks voided the contract. And I've got questions about your personal conduct. She glanced at Ellen, then me, her gaze calculating. Richard's face drained of color. What? No, he stammered, but Lydia cut him off. Save it. My team's already digging. You're done. She turned to me, tilting her head. You're Tom Wheeler, I assume? The loyal grunt he tried to bury. I nodded, numb. Stick around. You might be useful. Useful? Me? I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Ellen grabbed my arm again, pleading. Tom, I didn't know. I swear, I didn't. But I shook her off, my mind racing. Richard's lies, the fake layoffs, the sale, it was all unraveling, and I was caught in the middle, a pawn in a game I hadn't even known I was playing. Jake hiccuped, swaying. Told ya, Tom, lies. All of it. He slumped against the railing, the letter fluttering to the ground. Lydia picked it up, scanning it with a frown. Interesting, she muttered, then looked at me. You've got a choice, Wheeler. Help me nail him, or walk away and let this mess swallow you anyway. I stared at her, then at Ellen, her tear-streaked face, her trembling hands, and finally at Richard, cowering now, his charm crumbling. Revenge. It burned in me, cold and sharp, a blade I could wield. I'm in, I said, my voice steady for the first time that night. But not for you. For me. Ellen gasped, Tom, no, please. But I didn't look at her. I couldn't. The woman I loved was a ghost now, and I was something else. Something harder. Something crueler. I followed Lydia to her car, the snow crunching under my boots, Jake hollering after me, give him hell, Tom. Richard shouted threats, but they faded into the wind. Inside the sedan, Lydia handed me a folder, photos, emails, documents. Grayson's been skimming profits for years, she said. Your wife's just the tip of it. Help me, and he's finished. But it'll cost you. I nodded, flipping through the pages, my heart of stone. Cost me? It already had. Everything. As we drove off, I glanced back. Ellen stood on the porch, alone, snow falling around her like ashes. I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel anything, except the ice of vengeance settling in my bones. The sedan hummed through the snowy streets, Lydia Crane's sharp profile lit by the dashboard glow. I sat beside her, the folder open on my lap, its contents spilling secrets like blood from a wound. Emails between Richard and some overseas account, code names, numbers, promises of payouts. Photos of him shaking hands with men in suits I didn't recognize, their smiles cold and predatory. And then, a grainy shot of Ellen, sitting across from him at some dimly lit restaurant, her head bowed, his hand on hers. My stomach twisted, a fresh stab of betrayal cutting through the numbness. You all right, Wheeler? Lydia's voice was clipped, her eyes on the road. I didn't answer. How could I? All right? I was a man unmoored, my life a wreckage of lies, and here I was, clutching proof of it like a lifeline. He's been bleeding the factory dry, she went on, unfazed by my silence. Siphoning funds, faking reports. The layoffs were a smokescreen. Keep the union scrambling while he cashed out. Your wife, she paused, glancing at me. She was collateral damage. Or leverage. Depends how you look at it. Leverage, I muttered, the word bitter on my tongue. She thought she was saving me. My voice cracked, and I hated it, hated the weakness still clinging to me. Lydia shrugged, turning onto a side street lined with skeletal trees. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. Point is, Grayson's the target. You want him down. You've got to play smart, not emotional. Smart. I nodded, forcing the ice back into my veins. Emotional was Ellen crying on the porch, Jake slurring half-truths, me nearly choking Richard in the snow. Smart was this, digging through his dirt, turning his own game against him. I flipped another page, a memo, dated last week, detailing the factory sale to Apex Industries. Except, wait, the numbers didn't add up. This says the deal was worth $10 million, I said, frowning. But Jake said it's off. What? Lydia's lips twitched, almost a smile. You're quick. Apex pulled out when they caught wind of the union leaks. Your friend Mikey's letter wasn't the only one. Grayson overplayed his hand, and now he's scrambling. But he's not done. He's got a backup buyer, shadier, hungrier. If he closes that deal, he disappears, and your factory's gutted. Job's gone. Town finished. My chest tightened. The factory wasn't just my cage. It was Jake's, Mikey's, half the damn neighborhood's. Ellen's deal hadn't just betrayed me. It had been a spark in a powder keg threatening everyone I knew. So what's the plan? I asked, my voice steady now cold. We expose him, Lydia said, pulling into an empty lot behind a shuttered gas station. Publicly. Legally. I've got evidence, but it's not enough, yet. You've got access. People trust you. Get me something concrete. Records, witnesses, anything he can't bury. She handed me a burner phone, its weight heavy in my palm. Call me when you've got it. Don't trust anyone else. I stared at the phone, then at her. Why me? You don't even know me. Her eyes met mine, sharp and unreadable. I know your type. Loyal. Stubborn. And right now, pissed off enough to burn it all down. That's what I need. She was right. I was pissed, beyond pissed. A fire raged in me, fueled by Ellen's lies, Richard's smirk, the life I'd lost in one night. I nodded, tucking the phone in my coat. I'll do it. But when he's down, I want him to know it was me. Lydia's almost smile returned. Deal. She drove off, leaving me in the lot, snow dusting my boots. I stood there, alone, the folder clutched tight, my breath fogging in the frigid air. Revenge. It wasn't just a word now. It was a promise. I started walking. No destination, just movement to keep the thoughts from drowning me. The streets were quiet, the town asleep under its blanket of white, oblivious to the war brewing. My mind churned. Ellen's face, Richard's laugh, Jake's drunken warning. Then it hit me, the factory. If Richard was desperate, he'd be there, covering his tracks, tonight. I turned, boots crunching, and headed for the industrial district. The factory loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the sky, its lights dim but flickering. My key still worked, ironic that. Inside, the air was stale, machinery silent, the hum of 20 years reduced to echoes. I crept toward Richard's office, heart pounding, every creak of the floor a gunshot in my ears. The door was ajar, light spilling out. Voices, his and someone else. I peered through the crack. Richard stood at his desk, shredding papers, sweat beading on his forehead. Across from him, a man, tall, gaunt, with a scar slicing his left cheek, watched, arms crossed. You're late, Grayson, the man said, his accent thick, Eastern European maybe. The money's ready. Where's the deed? It's coming, Richard snapped, feeding another sheet into the machine. Just give me time. The man stepped closer, his voice dropping. Time's up. You promised a clean sale. Now I hear lawyers sniffing around. Fix it, or you're a ghost, and not the kind that walks away. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a sale. This was a deal, the kind that ended in shallow graves. I pulled out the burner, hands shaking, and snapped a photo through the gap. Richard, the stranger, the shredder mid-chew. Evidence. Lydia would love this. But then, crunch. My boot hit a loose bolt on the floor, the sound deafening in the silence. Richard's head whipped up. Who's there? He barked, grabbing a letter opener from the desk. The scarred man drew a gun, small, sleek, lethal. I bolted, adrenaline surging, ducking behind a lathe as footsteps pounded closer. Find him, Richard hissed. No loose ends. I crouched, heart slamming against my ribs, the folder digging into my chest. They were hunting me now. Me, Tom Wheeler, the nobody who'd trusted too much. I edged toward the back exit, snow visible through a cracked window, freedom so close. But then, lights outside. A truck roared up, tires crunching ice, and voices shouted. Police. Hands up, Police? How? Jake. Mikey. Someone had called them. Relief flooded me, then dread. Richard would spin this, pin it on me. Faithful Tom, caught sneaking around. I had the photo, the folder, but would it be enough? The door burst open, and I made my choice. I ran. Into the snow. Into the night. The truth my only weapon. Snow stung my face as I sprinted from the factory, the folder shoved inside my coat, the burner phone bouncing in my pocket. Shouts echoed behind me. Police, Richard, that scarred thug, all blending into a cacophony of chaos. Stop. Wheeler, stop, someone yelled, but I didn't. Couldn't. My lungs burned, my boots slipped on ice, but I kept running, toward the woods edging the industrial sprawl, toward shadows that might hide me. I crashed through branches, twigs snapping like bones, until I collapsed behind a fallen log, gasping. Flashlights swept the distance, too close. I fumbled for the phone, dialing Lydia. Pick up, pick up. She did, her voice sharp. Wheeler. What's happening? Factory, I panted. Richard's there, shredding stuff. Some guy with a gun. Cops showed up. I've got a photo. Silence, then, stay put. Send it. I'm coming. I sent the blurry shot, my hands trembling, and waited. Minutes stretched, agonizing, endless, until headlights pierced the trees. Not police. Lydia's sedan. I stumbled out, half frozen, and she yanked me inside. You're a mess, she said, peeling out. But that photo? Gold. She drove fast, weaving through back roads, her face grim. Grayson's pinned now, police caught his buddy. Scarface is singing already. But Richard's slippery. He'll blame you, Ellen, anyone. I nodded, numb. Let him try? I've got this. I patted the folder, its edges creased but intact. Lydia glanced at it. Good. We're hitting him where it hurts. Court, tomorrow. Tomorrow. The word felt unreal. My life had shattered in hours, and now I was, what? A soldier in someone else's war? No. This was mine now. Morning broke gray and bleak. February 22nd, 2025. I stood in the courthouse hall, unshaven, in yesterday's clothes, the folder under my arm. Lydia paced beside me, briefing me. Dates, names, a script to sink Richard. Stick to facts, she said. No outbursts. I nodded, but inside, I was a furnace, rage, grief, vengeance smoldering. The courtroom was packed, workers, union reps, townsfolk, all whispering as Richard strode in, suit pristine, smirk faint, but there. Ellen sat in the back, eyes red, avoiding me. Good. I couldn't look at her either. The judge called order, and Lydia pounced, presenting the photo, the folder, Mikey's letter. Richard's lawyer objected, blustered, but the evidence piled up, embezzlement, fraud, coercion. Then I took the stand. Every eye on me. Tom Wheeler, the quiet grunt, now a blade. He lied. I said, voice steady. Faked layoffs. Used my wife. Stole from us all. I pointed at him, my hand unshaking. He thought we wouldn't fight. Richard glared, but I saw it. Fear flickering in his eyes. The scarred man testified next. Caught, he'd flipped fast, detailing Richard's midnight deals, the overseas buyer, the shredder. Gasps rippled through the room. Ellen sobbed, once, then silenced herself. The judge's gavel fell. Richard was detained, assets frozen, trial pending. Lydia clapped my shoulder. You did it. I didn't smile. It wasn't over, not for me. Outside, snow fell thicker, blanketing the town in silence. I walked alone, the victory hollow. Richard was caged, for now, but Ellen was still free, still her. She caught me at the parking lot, voice small. Tom, can we talk? I stopped, back to her, fists clenched. Talk. You talked to Richard plenty. I was wrong, she whispered, stepping closer. I messed up, Tom. Please. I turned, eyes hard. You didn't mess up. You chose. And I paid. Her face crumpled, but I walked away, her pleas fading into the wind. She'd saved me, she claimed. No, she damned us. Jake found me later at the diner, sober for once, grinning. You're a hero, man. Factory's safe. Unions pushing Apex to renegotiate fair. I stared at my coffee, cold. Hero, I muttered. Sure. He frowned. You okay? I wasn't. I wouldn't be. But I nodded, because what else was there? That night, I went home, our home. Empty now. Her things were gone. Clothes, Photos, that lavender scent. Just a note. I'm sorry. I'll always love you. I tore it up, hands shaking, and sat in the dark. Love? Love didn't lie. Love didn't barter. Days blurred. The factory hummed again, workers clapping my back, calling me the guy who took Grayson down. I hated it. Hated the weight of their gratitude, the hole where Ellen should have been. Then Lydia called. Wheeler, we missed something. My gut twisted. What? Grayson had a fallback. Shell company, offshore. He's liquidating what's left, remotely. Trial won't stop him, he'll vanish. I cursed under my breath. How do we? She cut in. I've got a hacker tracing it. Need you to draw him out. Make him panic. Panic? I could do that. I used the burner, left a voicemail on Richard's old line, still active, somehow. It's Tom. I know about the shell. I've got more. Proof you can't shred. Meet me, or it's over. Bluffing, mostly, but it worked. He showed, at the old quarry, midnight, alone. You're bluffing, he sneered, voice ragged. I smirked, cold. Am I? Check your accounts. He did, phone trembling, and paled. Lydia's hacker had struck, freezing his funds mid-call. You. He lunged, but I sidestepped, letting him stumble into the dirt. You're nothing now, I said, towering over him. Police sirens wailed, Lydia's backup. He was done. For real. Spring came slow, snow melting into mud. Richard's trial ended, guilty, decades behind bars. The factory thrived, Apex bought in legit, jobs secure. Jake sobered up, Mikey led the union, and me? I sold the house. Too many ghosts. Moved to a cabin, woods around me, silence my only company. Ellen wrote once, living with her sister, starting over. Forgive me, she begged. I didn't reply. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give, not yet. Maybe never. I burned the letter, watched the flames eat her words, and felt nothing. Not hate, not love, just empty. Lydia offered me a job consulting, hunting crooks like Richard. You're good at this, she said. I took it. Not for justice, not for them, for me. To fill the void with purpose, to carve something from the wreckage. Nights, I sit by the fire, the folder kept as a reminder on the shelf. I won. I lost. I'm still here. Cruel? Cold? Maybe. But alive. And that's enough.